All right. Welcome everyone to Unlocking Salesforce, a profiles to permission sets journey. I'm here joined by two other co-presenters that will introduce themselves in just a moment, but we want to thank Amit for allowing us the ability to join and help out with Apex Hours. So without further ado, we'll get it to Booyan.
Hey guys, thank you again for taking the time to look at my presentation. So my name is Buyan Tyagarajan. I'm a Salesforce MVP, passionate about Salesforce. I've been in the ecosystem for a long time. I run a blog, Salesforce Maximizer, and currently a principal at IgonX. I'm here to share some best practices on how do you migrate from profiles to permission sets. Next slide, Jason.
Perfect.
Hello, everyone. My name is Abhinandana Gautam. I am a 6 times certified senior Salesforce consultant at IgonX. I've been in Salesforce ecosystem for over 8 years. I specialize in building and customizing Salesforce solutions across different verticals.
Fantastic. And my name is Jason Noratz. So I'm a senior consultant at IgonX. I am a 2-time Salesforce certified consultant, and I help our manufacturing and .com Salesforce team at IgonX and also do some work in the education and nonprofit space as well. Without further ado, we have the agenda for today. We're going to be going through why is this important? Why is this journey that we talked about important? What is the Salesforce roadmap for it? Some of the strategies on permission sets and permission set groups, object-based model, 3-set model, considerations, community users, the actual implementation itself, testing, and then end-to-end JML impacts and deployment strategy. We'll also have a moment at the end where we'll go through some frequently asked questions that we've seen from a few of the folks that we've worked with throughout the years and more recently, especially with this profile, the permission set endeavor. So with that said, the first question is, why is this important? So we talk about reducing time on maintenance for admins in the Salesforce ecosystem. That's huge. The permission sets allows us to, from a DevOps perspective, whether you're using a tool out there like a gear set, a Capado, and things of that nature, this actually will allow the granularity that you need when you're pushing packages from a sandbox into the production environment. So we're aligning that with what Salesforce has been pushing. And by I believe it's 2026, that date could shift, but by 2026, Salesforce is trying to push all admins and orgs over into that new permission sets first model and really stray away from the profiles, which is a collection of permissions. So the profiles, they were great in the sense of that got us off and running in Salesforce many years ago, but now it's just not as scalable and flexible for the reasons I just mentioned beforehand. Alrighty, so with that said, kind of chatting through, what's going on for the profiles and permission sets to profiles. Profiles are being phased out to permission sets. So Booyan, do you want to chat a little bit more about that?
Okay, all right. Thank you, Jason. So as we talked about, right? So the journey now, as with Salesforce mandated, as you plan, your implementation. One, obviously, 2026, spring 2026 is kind of the cutoff at this point of what Salesforce has done. So what does that mean? So going forward, you're not going to be able to create profiles. So the only options are permission sets. And then the big question is what's in profile, what's in permission sets? So that's a question, we always wrestle with. I think the way it's going to, we have the slides, we can walk through the details on it. But the big picture is that you want to use your profiles as minimum as possible, move everything from a permission standpoint to the permission set. There are still some pieces there which will remain in your profiles, like page layouts, which Abby will touch upon a little bit. And there is something on the default logins and IP ranges. Those are features which would be part of your profile as you go through the journey. And as you can see the slide, the ones on the left are the ones which are moving from profiles to permission sets. So let's go to the next slide, Jason. So So step one of the process. So now we know what's happening. Now let's look at what can we do in our current org in order to prepare and plan for it. So obviously, the one of the big things is an impact analysis. What you need to do, and as part of the impact analysis, I mean, I've done a lot of implementations now with all my clients right now, from small, mid-sized to enterprise companies who are kind of helping and transitioning in this journey. So the one of the couple of tools which might be help, there's a tool called Security Zen, which I kind of use, where you could export all your profiles into a spreadsheet format and kind of see what's the common permissions there. So that's number one. And obviously the user access permission assistant, from Salesforce, there's a couple of lab products which could help. But the fundamental question as you go through this is a redo of a security. So what that means, I mean, there's going to be personas. Personas could be, types of users, right? It could be a sales rep to a sales manager, marketing user to marketing rep, those kind of personas. So you want to kind of go revisit your personas and then come back and look at the drawing table and say, what's common across all these personas? What could be unique and who should have, certain access, kind of those kind of things has to be laid out. Again, I do also have an impact analysis toolkit, which I'd be happy to share as part of this presentation. So once we do the impact analysis, then we are going to get to the models. So let's go to the next slide, Jason. So the question is, all right, so now we got an impact analysis done, which said, here is my profiles, here's my permission sets maybe, and how do we kind of take this from an impact to implementation? So what I emphasize is a 6-tiered approach on this. The first step is to design a model. A model is like a blueprint, right? Like what can you do to start, which ones on profiles, permission sets. Once we have the model done, what are things to consider? And then we talk about user provisioning, which is a bigger impact on how the users will be created, and testing and implementation always comes on top of it. So let's talk about, let's go to the next one, Jason. So now let's talk about the foundation model. Um, as part of the foundation model, one of the things you would kind of do is, as you do the persona journey, you would be taking into account each of the personas could be a permission set group or a profile, or it could be a permission set, with a layer of permissions around it. So that's how it would come up. So these are just base principles, to start. But again, the fundamental thing I want to emphasize here is that before you go deeper into, what is a profile permission set, go take a step back, go back to your business users, define your personas. Once you have the personas defined, then let's talk about the two models, which I can talk about. Let's go to the next slide, Jason. So as we get through this journey, one of the things as part of this persona discussion, what will happen, you would end up in the new future state of permission sets, is that, for example, there is a sales rep persona and a sales manager persona, right? So there would be unique permissions, which could be a sales reps, on certain objects, accounts, contacts, and all that. You would create a permission set group. And from a permission set group, there will be muting, which is a concept you need to be aware of. These are certain unique permissions which you do not want to give to other users. So those are things you want to kind of think about from a security key principles. Some people always get confused with job function as personas because you might look at the org chart and say, well, there is a sales manager or regional vice president and a divisional vice president. Is those personas? No, they are not personas. Personas are common, unique functions, in your organization, like a sales, service, marketing, finance. Those are concrete functions. Underneath it, people perform, certain jobs. So that's your personas. Certain things to be aware of is enhanced privileges, which are like super user permissions. There could be consultants who will be working. You have to give them, temporary access. So those are things you need to consider and keep them as separate personas. Integration could also be a persona as part of this discussion. Let's get to the next slide, Jason. So as we go through this, this is one model I want to kind of touch upon. So if you're an organization, a small size, maybe around 10 to 50 users, in a kind of that scale, and maybe you have only 10 to 20, obviously standard objects, and maybe 10, 15 custom objects. This is a common model which I've seen some companies do. Now, if you look at this, the visual might be a little bit blurry there, but the point I want to emphasize here is it could be a permission set, could be based on an object. So for example, if everybody needs an account and there'll be a permission set for create, read, edit, and then you will have a permission set group for it. So you would create permission set groups for each objects and then a permission set for each permission. So read account, edit account, contact account, delete account. So those would be your permission sets. And you could expand on it. I mean, it's scalable, but at the same time, this could only scale only to around 10, 15 objects at the max. Otherwise, it'll become an overkill if you have more objects, right? Obviously, that's a limitation. So this is a model to kind of touch upon when you're a small size org. Let's get to the next one. Now, the next set of model, this would be for an enterprise org. And obviously, the question comes down to when you define, what is a permission set? Can you define something which is scalable and expanded across, a small group or a department or, a business unit or even global, right? So if you look at this three-tiered model, right, you have a foundation profile, like every user will get that minimum access profile that Salesforce already has. You would have one base permission set for the department, a sales department will be, and then one read permission. So you want to define in that sales permission what is the read, like all the users who can read on it, and then you can have a certain permission set, from a job wide. I'll take this model and walk through an example. Let's go to the next slide, Jason. So this so as you can see here, right, you've got a sales team, managers, sales directors, sales SVP, they can edit some executives, they can't delete, so the hierarchy, these are the requirements, right? The sales manager can do some edits. The sales directors, they want to read everything in their hierarchy or territory. And then on the other end of it, the executives want to report on it. If you go to the next slide, you could see how that model kind of fits in. You see here, there is the minimum access profile right on the bottom. There is a sales profile or a sales permission set you would create, which would have the base permissions for the objects the entire sales team gets, right? That's the one in blue. The one in executive, that's the one for executives. Then you define a read permission set, which basically says, okay, for the entire sales team, they want to read accounts, they want to read contacts, they want to read opportunities. So that's the read, right? Now let's get specific. The sales team, sales manager and director, they might be individual personas, and so they might need to have specific access on certain objects, read, write, or whatever current permission they have. Hence, you see those on red, like a persona for sales team or a sales manager will apply. And you also see there's a persona for executives because they might need to do some reporting on objects. They might have access to some sensitive objects like competitive insights, as an example. So that's why you would need it. And the reason you see muted is delete. You do not want a delete all for even your leadership because, what if they delete an account? I mean, you know what the thing is, it will delete the whole contacts and other objects. You don't want that to happen. So this could be a model which you can use to kind of scale it across a department. So let's get to the next one. Now, let's look at it from a global organization. So you have business units across the globe, and how do you kind of lay that foundation, which I had for a sales department. So the way to kind of look at it, it could be the same scale, but look at it in a four bucket. It's ones which you need open access. So let's define anything which is globally accessible to everybody in your organization across all business units. That's the open access. You might have an open access permission set group for that. What is restricted? So what is that you do not want people to see? So that's a permission set or a permission set group if it needs to. Then you would layer on top of it your common personas like sales, service, marketing for each business unit. There might be some unique permissions which you can add in as you need to, but the goal is to build it once, scale it, and kind of customize it as an on need basis. And then you always have your unique personas based on business units. So these are ways to kind of expand your global enterprise security model. Let's go to the next slide.
Yeah,
Jason.
absolutely. And we're also just going to adjust for a moment here, just so everyone can kind of see. Perfect. We're good to go.
All right. Thank you, Jason. Now I'll let
And
Abby, kind of talk through it.
Yep. Thank you, Bjorn. So I'm going to speak about the considerations with this new feature. So one of the significant considerations is how page layout assignment continues to work with this new feature. So if you look at the slide, it shows the current page layout assignments, which exist only at profile level based on the record type. So what you see in the diagram is an opportunity object and how the page layouts are assigned across profiles based on different record types. In the next slide, can you? Yes. In the next slide, we see how default record type is selected on profile. What that means is when you see profiles object settings for that object opportunity, the default record type stays at profile level. Now, when you see the future state in the next in the next slide, you can always maintain the record type assignments at permission set level. And what you're seeing right now is the page layout assignment exists only at profile level based on record type. So you can always manage your record type assignments at permission set level. However, the page layout assignment is going to stay at profile level. Moving on to the next slide. The other consideration is to use muting permission sets. So before we talk about muting permission set, what is a permission set group? Basically, it includes all of the permissions in its included permission sets, and you can include a permission set in more than one permission set group. So the ability to include permission sets in more than one permission set group offers a lot of flexibility. However, let's say, what if you don't want to assign all of the permissions in a given permission set to users in that permission set group? Now let's see an example here. You have a can we go back to the same slide? Yes. You have a permission set group called sales staff users, right? That contains 3 permission sets. Now, one of the permission set enables delete on accounts and also on opportunities, but you no longer want all the group members to have delete permissions. However, another permission set group also references the same permission set number 3. So instead of creating another permission set, you create a muting permission set to mute delete on accounts and opportunities. That way, assigned group members will no longer have the permission set for these objects. However, users assigned to the permission set outside of the group retain the ability to delete the objects. You can add up to 1 muting permission set per permission set group. Now, other considerations are phased rollouts. So it's a smart choice or a smart approach to ensure a smooth transition and minimize disruptions. You can also keep record types to a minimum, as it's a good practice in Salesforce to simplify your data model and make your system more manageable. Moving on to the next slide. Yes, so the next one is about the considerations related to login hours and IP ranges. So currently login hours and IP ranges are set or available at profile level to restrict access so that users log in outside of the ranges, they're prevented access. Now, Salesforce provides the ability to leverage connected apps to restrict external application based on IP addresses and login hours. This can enhance security and control over how external applications access your data. One can also leverage identity provider to restrict permissions for location-based access control. Moving on to the next one. Yes, so let's talk about how the privileged users can be set up. So who are privileged users? So usually they are the individuals who have administrative privileges to modify systems or view highly confidential information. Now, what we can do is we can maintain permission set groups for data admins, system admins, domain admins with enhanced permissions. We can also create separate permission set groups for privileged access for users like developers, interim consultants, advanced business users, or subject matter experts. Now, you can also create mute permission set to disable, modify all, and delete all permissions for users who only require temporary access. And let's talk about considerations on the strategy for phase out. So this slide explains how can we roll out in phases. Now, consider consolidating the existing profile permissions, and let's try to keep the number of profiles at minimum so that the number doesn't exceed, let's say, 5. Then maintain one base profile for all users with minimal permissions. You can maintain a profile for just the API only user, and you can maintain a profile for system admins. In the next slide, yeah, I would like Jason to continue with this.
Yeah, absolutely. So with some of the considerations for strategy on permission sets and how it really affects community users within Experience Cloud, that's what I'd like to chat through a bit more. So setting up the baseline security with org-wide defaults using external access, that's things to consider, right? Leveraging permission sets for authenticated users, keeping a separate permission set for guest users. This is key and something that all admins should be looking towards. And then leveraging the delegated admin feature for advanced guest users to manage their own accounts and contacts. And I'll go into that in just a moment. And then watching out for guest users owning records and set up the default owner if needed. So these are just some things to think about in the realm of the Experience Cloud and how it affects community users, in particular guest users and external access. So with that said, let's dive a bit more into that external management, right? So we have the idea of admins can set up permits and permit external users to manage permission sets for just a variety of other users, whether it be resetting passwords, activating, deactivating, and the ability to add new users to other accounts as needed, right? So we have this idea of the account switcher component, right? So this allows external users the ability to access other accounts. We're going to dive into this in a few slides about how it affects a partner site as well as a customer site. So those are things to be thinking about as well. We'll now touch into a little bit about the configuring an external manage account to allow external users to manage another account. Again, that's a very common use case for a partner site instance. We also have the idea of external managed account designates a managing user. That way the target account they can manage and the type of access they're authorized to is on that specific target account. We also have the idea of these partner users with the delegated external user admin permissions doing a lot of the things that you would normally delegate to your own system admins. And this is in addition to, obviously administrators and internal CRM licensed users. So again, it's a really great way to promote portal self-sufficiency and the permission sets and that journey from profile to them is really Salesforce is taking note and trying to make it accommodate. So with that said, here's some of those things that I was mentioning, right? So you've got that switch accounts. So imagine I log in and I see that my target account appears. You've got a blue check mark indicating that the account that the managing user is on, and then you've got my account, which indicates the account of the managing user. So coming in here and being able to toggle that functionality and having that permissioning is key for any of these things going forward. So with that being said, when we think about this for the customer side of things, we've got, making sure from a permissions side of things is that enabling digital experiences, then assigning the permission sets to each of the users, digital experience must be enabled. So that's why I specifically call that in here, because all sites option shows in the quick find under digital experience after enablement. So again, here's a screenshot below. This is what you would see. And when we're talking about customer sites, we would also say the same thing for partner sites as well. But I wanted to kind of showcase this in the sense of for customer experience cloud sites, because a lot of the times, if you're not in that partner or manufacturing or retail ecosystem, you're going to go with the customer site where they're coming in. Maybe they're buying a product, maybe they're looking at different products. So things to consider for that, as well as the partner site. So engaging with your partners to understand specific needs, preferences for the portal, leveraging the native partner security permissions to allow for that easy targeting that we talked about beforehand with some of those new features, and then allowing, creating those various page variations and then assigning them to the correct audiences according to the permission sets, allowing for, a user who actually needs to be able to see certain information and, to be able to do that. And then the last piece I'll dive into is the leveraging the new delegated external user admin and external managed accounts. So those are two things that I talked about before, but I want to put it a bit into perspective. So imagine you've got a user and is a member of a trading coalition, and they oversee 5 outlets. One might be the main outlet, and then there's 5 subsidiary outlets. And that user may, have the convenience of just logging into a collaborative portal and then have the ability to view details pertinent to a chosen outlet of one of the 5 using the outlet switcher. and that's that functionality. So the outlet switcher grants him the flexibility to toggle between the different outlets to which he has access. And then when he navigates to that specific outlet, he aspires to handle the user management tasks for that particular outlet. So any one of those five can be, addressed. We also, are just thinking of, okay, there's quite a bit of use cases that we can use this for. So just wanted to kind of get everyone thinking about, okay, it's not just a customer use case. It's not just a partner, a site use case. It's just thinking about that whole overarching holistic migration from profiles to permission sets.
Yes, so the testing strategy, in order to succeed in implementing and managing permission sets, a careful planning, testing, documentation, and ongoing maintenance are the keys. So let's see how the testing strategy works. First of all, identify test cases for each persona to be migrated. And then identify test cases for privileged accesses, like we discussed before, for application admins, local admins, system admins, etc. Identify test cases for exclusive permissions or unique permissions that you may require, and identify test cases for sensitive data access like personal identifiable information, payment card information, or any payment information for that matter. Once test cases are identified, test automation can be strategized using third-party apps from App Exchange, or you can run your test classes to run common test cases.
Yeah, and I wanted to also touch on the implementation strategy as well of defining phrases based on the persona and the department and having a backup strategy to roll back if needed, right? So Abby was talking about some of those testing components, and you might have seen this slide toggle in between. I wanted to kind of bring it back to this and kind of just ensure everyone knows about the org-wide defaults, setting those to private before you do your permission sets, ensuring all public read-only and read-write are deployed in the initial rollout. That's something that doesn't always happen, but really should happen and should be, we should be thinking about that as administrators, as anyone who the audience of Apex Hours, whether it's administrators, developers, someone on the PM team. So things like that for those initial rollouts is huge. Also getting the subject matter expert for each persona to test those permissions, to test our permissions, right? And having the mechanisms to track the profile, permission sets, and permission set group changes is absolutely fundamental, right? So whether that be in the spreadsheet, a DevOps tool, those are the things that allow for a successful implementation on top of these testing strategies that Abhinandana was able to chat through. So I know Bhuyan's going to chat in just a moment about the, automating user provisioning impact. So have at it, Bhuyan.
All right, thanks, Jason. So as Jason and Abhi were talking about, testing and implementation. So one thing just want to call out from that implementation slide which Jason had shared, as obviously, when you roll a security redesign, it's a big and initiative. You don't want to roll it out across every department. You might do a phase one, right? On your phase one, before you define a department, it's a sales or service, whatever the department is. One of the things to identify is that common read permission sets, or objects which are going to be read or across could be a good one to kind of add that as part of the implementation. Now, going to another important aspect of when you do the security redesign as part of the permission set journey, user provisioning is an important aspect of it. I mean, the word JML, which is joiners, movers, and leavers, is a pretty common acronym across your HR, your CISOs, all those departments. So there might be two scenarios which you might be encountering. One, you might have a manual user provisioning where if a new user joins a company, somebody creates a ticket in your service now or any kind of ticket management tool, and then a Salesforce admin creates that user with a certain defined role. That's the manual user provisioning. Or there could be automated user provisioning, where based on your system, right, your HR system, which is Workday or PeopleSoft or whatever it is, the system can be connected to your IDP, which is your single sign-on solution, right, Microsoft or Azure or Active Directory, and then it goes into Salesforce. So one of the key things as you kind of do this is to consider a couple of things as part of this impact analysis. Because you now added these new personas and new profiles and permission sets, you got to go back and re-update your tool if you have automated user provisioning to be done. The second thing, you always want to make sure that since you're doing a security redesign anyway, just do the automated user provisioning. Saves tons and tons of time, and your IDP support group would love this because of the considerable amount of time taken to do this manual permission. The one of the key cool features which has come up in the latest Spring releases is the user access policies, which gives you a way to kind of automate user provision. So what it means is, so let's say a sales rep needs to be given like 4 permission sets and 3 groups and all that. That's a painful manual clicks right now happening by an admin. With an user access policy, you could create that once. It's like think about it as a flow with 6 tasks or 6 actions. It could easily assign users to certain permission sets, assign them to groups, queues. All of those could be automated using user access policy. So watch out for that. But I also understand there is a need for manual user provisioning. So in that kind of a scenario, make sure that the new personas, the new redesigned security components kind of fit in to your plan. So that's the impact from a user provisioning standpoint. Let's get to the next slide, Jason. Okay, on the bigger aspect of all this is compliance. So every organization, I mean, if you're a sensitive financial services healthcare company, one of the key things is that you need to kind of make sure as part of this project, your CISO team, your audit risk management team, they're all involved in the security redesign. And the reason to get this redesigned is at the end of the day, after this redesign, security can be get to a state of spending less time on audits. And when you define this new security and this profile permission set model is already defined in an automated user provisioning, it's easy. If you have an auditor, go to that automated tool. It could tell you, because of this, you have a sales or service user. That's why you were assigned a permission set. So it's easy to go and report and log that audit. But in a manual user provisioning, you might want to have like a log. I call this like a security log of well, based on a user's job role or job type. Here is the persona, and here is the profile permission set. You get access to it. So you might want to kind of keep that as a master record of it, and then keep changes on it, and that will be very helpful for auditing. The second thing is, unwanted access, privileged access. Monitor those permissions and make sure that you have a process for recertifications on a yearly basis, where there's a question on why these users are being assigned a particular role, a particular profile, a particular permission set, and there is a governance involved in it. One of the things, from an enterprise standpoint, is IGA tools, identity governance tools, which can help to automate or kind of maintain that security blueprint, which would be helpful for auditing as part of it. So keep the compliance and audit risk team as a partner as part of this engagement. So let's get to the next slide, Jason. So once we did that, a couple of things again from a Salesforce tool suite. Security Shield has this new thing called Permission Set, Center, right, which kind of helps to track blind spots. You could track permission set changes with it, and then you could also track malicious apps, in your app exchange, which are doing some unwanted permissions, blind spots. So this is a tool to kind of watch out for. Obviously, it's an add-on part of the Security Shield, thing, which will be, in the available if you talk to your account rep as part of it. Let's go to the next slide, Jason. So in all, to summarize, so here are a couple of things to think about. And as we go through the profile to permission set journey, first of all, think about it. What kind of a model do you want to kind of deploy? Again, the model basically means the model on, whether it is a 3-tiered, like the symbol object-based permission set, or do you want to go by a persona-based permission set, kind of a journey. So that's number one to agree on. Once you have the model defined, then let's look at those considerations. Abby laid out on the page layout side. Jason talked about the community impact access. So let's get all those considerations and kind of at least have that as part of your security strategy. And then the next piece of it is, okay, what is impact from a user provisioning standpoint? If you are automated versus manual, do you have the current new redesigned security updated so that your user provisioning goes seamlessly? And then testing as an important aspect of it. What are the key points? Persona-based testing is important. Try to get it automated and have SMEs involved to ensure that the right people get the right access. And finally, from an implementation standpoint, it's always a phased rollout. As part of the phased rollout, consider some common permission sets, which will be global across the organization, can be part of that initial phase one. And finally, at the end of the day, it is also to meet compliance. And so the key question is like, what was the new security model? What is the reasoning, behind for people for privileged access? Can we put some detective controls or as part of it, or proactive controls, work with your infosec team or your compliance team or a risk management team to ensure that your new redesigned security model is aligned with that. And also be a little bit proactive and ask about what kind of audit reporting your organization is doing, and so that this could be done, in a painless way to reduce their time. So these are just a couple of quick takeaways as part of this approach. Let's go to the next slide, Jason.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing that I will also do is I'm going to switch our view just a little bit as we begin to close things out. So if you bear with me one moment, and fantastic. So what we want to chat through just a little bit is some of the frequently asked questions that we've received, and what are most clients, what are most people who are in the ecosystem and that are thinking about these profiles to permission set changes, what are they thinking about? So the first one that we get a lot, and I know Booyan probably, has definitely seen this, heard this, is that when will Salesforce enforce only permission sets, right? Booyan is, can you speak to that a bit more?
Yeah, so obviously, if you look at the Salesforce roadmap, 2026 is the time frame when Salesforce is looking to, transition from profile to a permission set. Now, having said that, I mean, you know how all the lightning transition went. So there could be some time, but I would say at this point, start preparing ahead rather than be thrown out, at the last minute. So 2026 is your time frame for that, Jason.
Yeah, fantastic. And I would imagine that we've got Abby's probably seen this with some of the work that she's done previously, but given these page layouts, and what should admins do with profile versus permission sets, right? I know Abby, you talked a lot about that. Can you just kind of, what should admins be thinking when they're trying to, talk about this internally and pitch this?
Sure. So, yeah, we touched this a bit when we were doing page layout considerations. Usually, there are two steps involved in page layout assignments, right? One is assigning the record type on profile or permission set, and the other one is assigning page layouts from object manager or from a profile. Now, in the future state, when permission set group comes into picture, we can probably move the record type assignments to permission sets. However, the default record type will still remain on the profile, and the page load assignments could still be maintained at profiles based on record types, the way we saw in the, during the considerations.
Fantastic. No, that's really good insight. And some other things I think that I've definitely heard, I know Booyan has heard as well, but what should a Salesforce admin and a team, so any viewer of the Apex Hours series specifically today, what should they be thinking about to sell this effort and project to their CTO, their CIO, this whatever committee is in charge of trying to budget and put things on the calendar for the roadmap for the year? So Booyan, can you speak to that a bit more?
That's a good question, Jason. So obviously the big elephant, I mean, obviously being an admin or an architect or a CRM director, you go to your leadership and say, well, we need to now budget for a profile to permissions to such story. I mean, you know how that will go, right? So it's not a Salesforce defined mandate. So instead of making it a Salesforce mandate, so let's take a step back to sell the value of it. Obviously, the value aspect of it is one, it's going to help to increase adoption. I mean, enterprise organizations, having really, best practice only 15 to 25% adoption. With the redesigned security, you're going to make sure that all the users are getting the right access and the right objects in place, so they're not getting overwhelmed, and so they can get the features working. So it's going to increase your adoption. So that's number one, to kind of say. The second aspect of it is reduce your compliance time, right? So with the redesigned security, obviously, your compliance to tracking changes, monitoring risks, all of that, and even answering audit questions will have to be reduced even 50%. So that's another way to kind of look at it before when you sell it to your leadership. And the third aspect of it is also security. I mean, security is a big aspect of it. I mean, there's always a million questions of people, giving unwanted access, or there might be this old profile where you have view all, delete all access. So it's a right time to go revisit it and also reduce risk from a future organization compliance standpoint, meeting the CISO needs. So have the CISO team, have the risk management team as a partner, work with the IT team and ensure that you meet their governance as well as part of their overall deployment process as part of the project. And I'm sure that that would help to kind of sell it. And I do have a blog to share with some best practices on it, as well as some toolkits if you need further questions on it.
Fantastic. Well, thank you, Abhinandana Bhuyan, for helping out and kind of, giving everyone a good feel, hopefully, for, permission sets and really what that journey actually looks like. So, well, thanks a lot, everyone. And we'll do one quick little view of everyone so you can see who was chatting with the entire crew. So, we hopefully you enjoyed. Thanks again to Amit for allowing us to present. And we'll chat with everyone in the comment section. So feel free to reach out, and our contact info is on that last slide. So thanks again, everyone, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, Jason.
Bye.